Resident Evil has never made a faithful live-action film adaptation. Not once. Not in 25 years of trying. The Anderson films weren't even pretending. Welcome to Raccoon City actually tried, and it still got completely cooked. And now Zach Cregger, an actual horror director who has actually played these games, is making what should be the one. Except he's not. I'm going to show you why most of what the internet is panicking about right now probably isn't even in the final film, and why that still doesn't fix the bigger problem. Now let me give credit where it's due, because the test screening chatter coming back on this film is legitimately impressive and promising. Sony gave Zach Cregger $20 million. That's about the same amount as Welcome to Raccoon City's entire budget, and handed him full creative control. No studio notes or this guy needs to be in it type of stuff, just a filmmaker and a blank check. So what did he deliver? A 90-minute film described as all gas, no brakes, built almost entirely around tension. One person in that screening room even called it a horror version of Fury Road. Now I know Fury Road doesn't really feel like a Mad Max movie, but I more so think they were talking pacing here. Practical effects dominate. No digital CGI slop, which is probably the best news of all, I'm not gonna lie. The environments are being described as very much in line with the early games. It's going to absolutely get the hard R rating, it's very gory, and the tonal reference Cregger is pulling from is Evil Dead 2. That alone should tell you where his head is at. And this is Zach Cregger, the man who made Barbarian, a movie that at times felt like a Resident Evil inspired film. His directorial instincts are all over what's being described here. And we just got confirmation at CinemaCon. The trailer that screened, not released publicly yet unfortunately, described rooms slick with blood, a pale bloated creature lurking in a sewer, and a group of zombies leaping off of rooftops and exploding like bloody bombs when they hit the ground. This is all the markings of a filmmaker who was actually allowed to cook. Sony didn't give him $20 million and step back because they thought he'd make something forgettable. The direction is right and the tone is right, and for the first time in a very long time, the filmmaker attached to this franchise is genuinely right. But here's the thing. That same screening, those same reactions praising the filmmaking, are also saying the film has practically nothing to do with the games. That's a direct quote from someone who was in that room. Outside of Raccoon City and Umbrella, practically nothing to do with the games. And I want to sit with that for a second, because that frustration is legitimate and warranted. It's not nostalgia or gatekeeping, it's the simple fact that this franchise, one of the most lore-dense, character-rich horror universes in gaming history, has never once been given a faithful cinematic treatment, not even close. The Anderson films weren't even trying. Alice was a made-up character. The plot was original fiction pretending to be Resident Evil for 16 years. Now, Welcome to Raccoon City at least tried. I'll give them that. It had Leon, it had Jill, it had the Spencer Mansion, and still managed to be one of the most embarrassing uses of source material in gaming movie history. Characters with silly arcs, a budget that couldn't keep up with its lofty vision, a Wesker twist that landed like a wet sock on a cold floor. So when Cregger says stuff like he's not here to retell Leon's story, I mean, that's technically accurate. But we've never actually had Leon's story told properly on screen. What we have gotten is loose fan service dressed up as adaptation. Here is what is confirmed about Cregger's film. Raccoon City is the setting. Umbrella is the antagonist. There are recognizable monsters and Easter eggs to the games. Cregger himself has gone on record saying the film follows the rules, that it's obedient to the lore, that it's expanding canon rather than rewriting it, but callbacks aren't canon. Easter eggs aren't the soul of a historic franchise. Setting a film in Raccoon City doesn't make it Resident Evil any more than setting a film in New York makes it a Spider-Man movie. So the question is real. Is what we're getting actually enough? And then the leaks hit, and here's where things get really, really messy. Someone on my short about this brought this up in the comments, and at first I didn't want to believe it, but I thought it was too big to ignore, so I went down that rabbit hole. Here's what's being reported. And I want to be clear up front, confirmed versus rumored, because they're not the same thing. So what is confirmed? The protagonist is Brian, played by Austin Abrams. He basically plays the same role he did in Weapons, laid back, slightly off kilter, a drug-using package delivery driver, possibly organ delivery, we're not sure, tasked with getting a mysterious briefcase or cooler to Raccoon City General Hospital during the early stages of a deadly outbreak. That's the Spine. Brian is essentially a player avatar, thrown into chaos, moving from one nightmare to the next. Very minimal backstory with almost no character development, just forward momentum through hell, which honestly, I'm cool with. That is the game design. Point A to point B, and as you get deeper into the game, the more intense things get. I love the simplicity of it all. Now, what's leaked? Some reports suggest the T-virus may not be the infection mechanism in this film. The word circulating is, and I kid you not, tentacle-based infection. Victims transforming into bioengineered monstrosities rather than the standard zombies that we all love from the original games. This right here is the worst one. You can't have or even slap the title Resident Evil on a movie if there is no T-virus. It is what started everything. The trauma our characters went through, Raccoon City's demise, all the experiments derived from the virus. This is the scariest leak of them all, but I digress. And then there are even more extreme rumors describing mutations that some people are calling alien zombies. That's the most crazy version and most contested, and I'll tell you exactly why it's probably not in the film, but before we get there, there's one specific detail that detonated in the comments, and I understand why. An alleged script note describing a character wearing an RCPD jacket, Raccoon City Police Department. And the note allegedly says fans will, well, get really excited in their pants at this reveal. That landed like a grenade in the community, because every person who's ever touched a Resident Evil game, from hardcore veterans to one-time players, know it's RPD, not RCPD. That's not a minor detail. That's a huge slap in the face of the entire fan base. That's the kind of mistake you make when you're writing something without full access to the IP. And that right there is the key to everything. Here's what I think about all this, and actually something I haven't really heard anyone talk about. Zach Cregger wrote a Spec script back in 2023. It was a slapstick horror that came before he was officially hired for this film, before Sony signed anything and had Capcom's blessings or access to the actual IP library. Now, when you write a Spec script around existing IPs, especially something as legally dense and Capcom controlled as Resident Evil, you cannot lean heavily on franchise-specific, trademarked elements, because the deal might not close. And if it doesn't, you need that script to be sellable somewhere else. It has to exist without the IP attached, and he even said if he didn't get the IP rights, he would still want to make this film. So, you make substitutions. Logical, legally safe substitutions. T-virus becomes tentacle-based infection. Something more original, more generic, something that doesn't require a license. Standard Romero zombies become bioengineered monstrosities. Strange enough to feel unique, but unattached enough to survive without the Resident Evil name. And with that, you get RPD becomes RCPD. Again, close enough to feel familiar to anyone who knows the games, but different enough to avoid a copyright issue in a document that might be pitched elsewhere. These weren't creative decisions. They were simply insurance. Legal placeholders for a deal that hadn't happened yet, and a way to make the film either way. And then the deal happened. And since being officially hired, listen to every public statement Cregger has made. Love letter to the games, obedient to the lore, follows the rules of the game universe, expanding canon, not rewriting it. He has explicitly said he knows the fan base will crucify him if he ruins the source material. He's aware of what he's stepping into. And here's the thing, I feel like he wouldn't just say these things if they weren't true. If the movie doesn't deliver on these statements, well, then he'll face ridicule for the rest of his directing career. Now, the CinemaCon trailer did show new creatures, this is true. Zombies leaping off buildings, original designs, things we haven't seen in the games, but no tentacle monsters. There were no signs of alien zombies. What Cregger is doing is building his own creatures inside a world of RE's biological horrors. That's what an adaptation does. You blend your style with the existing lore. It still feels grounded in a mutated virus. That at least is Resident Evil. The Spec script is what I think leaked. The final film is a different monster altogether, but the internet is treating them like they're one and the same. So after all that, taking all of that in, here's where I'm at with all this. They got the best horror director this franchise has ever had. You've got positive test screenings, Practical effects dominant. Again, this is amazing. Hard R rating confirmed Evil Dead 2 as the tonal DNA, and a filmmaker with full creative control and a studio that wrote a $20 million check and got the F out of the way. Here's what we get. It's not going to be a lore-accurate Resident Evil film. Probably never was going to be. Original protagonist with zero connection to established characters. No Leon or Jill, and absolutely no iconic arcs. We will get callbacks and Easter eggs that is supposed to replace the bones of this franchise. Raccoon City will be a backdrop rather than a living, breathing thing. Honestly, this is shaping up to be a genuinely great horror film that uses Resident Evil as its backdrop. And I want to be as clear as I can about that, because it's not the same thing as a great Resident Evil film. Two totally different things. One of those I'm leaving cautiously optimistic about. The other, we're still waiting. And I fear we might always be waiting. But here's the question I actually want to put out there, because this is the one that matters going forward, not just for this film, but for where this franchise goes in live action. If this thing opens up huge in September, which I have a feeling it will, if Cregger delivers something critics and audiences genuinely love and it makes real money and spawns sequels, are we all okay with that becoming the template? Are we willing to accept a parallel Resident Evil cinematic universe? One that uses the setting, uses the mythology, tells entirely original stories the way Outbreak did, the way the comics and novels always have? Or are we still holding out for the adaptation this franchise actually deserves? Because at this point, I'm genuinely starting to wonder if a truly faithful Resident Evil film can ever actually be made. Or if Hollywood will always choose its own story over the one the fans already know and love. Now, if you guys want more Resident Evil and horror game coverage, then join the Dead Zone and hit that sub button. We are the Respawn Bros. Thank you for stopping by, and as always, keep dying, keep trying.